There are no ideas more central to America's democracy and identity as liberty and equality. The Declaration of Independence lists liberty among mankind's inalienable rights and states all men are created equal. But it wasn't until 1870 when the 15th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified, extending the vote to African American men. And women were not given the right to vote in America until 1920, when the 19th Amendment was ratified. America's democracy has indeed been imperfect, but throughout our history, we've sought to address our imperfections. After all, the story of America is not a story of a perfect nation, it's a story of a nation in pursuit of a more perfect nation. So it's sobering but not surprising that it took us nearly to the end of the 20th century to expand and acknowledge the rights of another group of Americans who suffered discrimination through history, people with disabilities. This Sunday, we mark the 25th anniversary of one of the most important civil rights victories in America's history, the enactment of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act set forth four great goals for people with disabilities: equal opportunity, full participation, independent living, economic self-sufficiency. But the fundamental goal of the ADA is simple. In the words of one activist, the ADA is about securing for people with disabilities the most fundamental of rights, the right to live in the world. It's worth remembering that it was a bipartisan victory. Senator Bob Dole, a Republican, a veteran wounded by German machine gun fire in World War II, and Tom Harkin, a Democrat from Iowa, teamed up to get this done. When President George H.W. Bush signed the ADA into law, he said, "Today's legislation brings us closer to the day when no Americans will ever again be deprived of their basic guarantee of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Senator Tom Harkin called the day the ADA passed the proudest day of his legislative career. I remember a story he told in the Senate a few years ago. When he was first elected to the Senate, his whole family came for the swearing in. They set up in the gallery right behind me. He even arranged a sign language interpreter for his older brother Frank, who was deaf. But he was told by the guard outside the gallery door that the interpreter was not allowed to stand in the gallery and interpret. Tom Harkin couldn't believe it. So he came down to the floor and told Majority Leader Bob Dole the situation. Senator Dole said, "I'll take care of it," and he did. It was the first thing they did together. It sure wasn't the last. 5 years later, they watched President Bush sign the ADA into law. I want to give credit to some tireless advocates who helped make that a reality. Justin Dart, the father of the ADA, who's passed on, and my great friend from Chicago, Marka Bristow, President and CEO of Access Living. 1977, Marka had a serious accident and broke her neck, leaving her paralyzed from the chest down. She lost her job, her house, and her health insurance. A lot of people would have given up, but not Marka Bristow. She led an army of people who couldn't see, hear, walk, and talk to mobilize and pass the most comprehensive civil rights law since the Civil Rights Act of '64. Marka is a force of nature, and every day, Marka and her team are on the front line helping people with disabilities. They help people like Michael Grice. He uses a power wheelchair and has been involved with disability activism for many years. He has a bright personality that draws many people to him. He speaks with passion and compassion, calls himself a very active person. He was living on his own in an apartment in Hyde Park on the south side of Chicago until health complications led him into a group home where he lived for more than a year. His health continued to deteriorate. He moved into a nursing home. Marka and the group home staff planned for him to stay at the nursing home for 6 to 8 weeks and then move back on his own. Those 6 to 8 weeks became nearly 3 years. Michael grew more frustrated, and that's when Marka Bristow and Access Living came to the rescue. They helped Michael find a new place so he could live on his own. And last year, Michael was able to move from the nursing home into his own apartment. I'm proud of activists like Michael and Marka and the folks at Access Living. We owe them a debt of gratitude for helping America realize our full potential. It's hard to imagine, but before the Americans with Disabilities Act, people with disabilities were denied the opportunity to fully participate in society. Back then, very few transit systems had buses or trains equipped for wheelchairs. If you needed a haircut or to see a doctor or just wanted to meet a friend for a cup of coffee, You probably had to rely on family and friends or a social service agency. The Americans with Disabilities Act has changed that. The Americans Disabilities Act has changed America. Every day you can see how far we've come as you walk down the street with curb cuts, ramps, braille signs, assistive living devices. And because of the ADA, thousands of Americans with disabilities get to go to school, a good education, enter the workforce. But we've still got a long way to go. The unemployment rate for people with disabilities is still too high. Most people with disabilities want to work, have to work, and when they do work, that can impact our communities in ways that are hard to imagine. Let me tell you about the late Bob Greenberg, legendary sportscaster at WBEZ Radio in Chicago. For his loyal Chicago radio audience, Bob described sporting events they couldn't see. But Bob's story is unique because Bob couldn't see them either. Bob Greenberg was blind, but that didn't stop him from achieving his dream. In the early 1980s, Hall of Fame basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was taking questions from reporters after a hard game. He turned to Bob, who was holding a white cane and a microphone, and he said, "How'd you get here?" "It wasn't hard," Bob said. He then explained how he knew the exact number of steps from his home to the Lake Street L, how he felt for the right combination of coins to put in the turnstile, then how he knew the exact number of steps to take along West Madison to Chicago Stadium. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar paused to take that in and finally said, "Ask your question, sir." It was clear. Bob Greenberg worked hard to get where he was. There's no doubt that laws like the ADA helped Bob. I would just wish we'd have passed it sooner. Maybe Bob's road to achieving his dream could have been a little smoother. Let me close by noting this. I wonder if the Americans with Disabilities Act were called before the United States Senate today if it would pass. We know how great it is. We know what it's done for America. But there were always voices then, and there are voices now, that question whether government ought to have that big a say, that big a role, that big a voice in our private lives and our public lives. Thank goodness Bob Dole, a Republican, and Tom Harkin, a Democrat, put together a coalition that realized that at some moments in history we have to move together as an American family to solve a problem, and we use our government to achieve that goal. The day the ADA passed, Senator Harkin stood at this podium in the chamber and gave his entire speech in sign language. Afterward, he said it was the first time anyone ever gave a long-winded speech on the Senate floor and no one ever heard him. He was wrong. His brother Frank heard him. Mark Bristow heard him. Michael Grice heard him. Bob Greenberg heard him. And millions of others with disabilities heard that speech. Before leaving the Senate, Senator Harkin taught me a wonderful sign for the word America. It's this: all 10 fingers joined together, rotating in a circle around your chest. The sign language for America. That is the America that we all are striving to become, a place where no one's left out, where we're all included within the circle of equal opportunity. And that's how we honor our Constitution and our great nation, with liberty and justice for all.